Exactly. And yeah, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and maybe share where you're connecting from or something that you're looking forward from this online event. And I can start things off. My name is Mathieu Young, pronounced Hide, Iliel en français, and I am who I am. I am the virtual programs coordinator for Pride at Work Canada. I'm located in Toronto, and I'm honestly just really looking forward to creating this beautiful conversation with folks that I've been following for years now. I'm just really excited to be here. This kind of event is something that I've always wanted to do, and what an honor to be able to do that in my workplace. Just gonna read off some comments. Thank you for joining us from Ottawa. A lot of folks from Toronto. I see some folks from Calgary, from New Brunswick. This is so amazing. We have people joining us from all corners of Canada. Before we begin, I have some technical notes I'd like to share with you. Start by a land acknowledgement. We'd like to take a moment to recognize the territory on which I currently find myself. Pride at Work Canada's main office is located in Toronto and has been part of the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Métis, and Mississauga of the New Credit First Nation for thousands of years. And the One Spoon Treaty allowed them to share access and use of the natural resources of the Great Lakes region in a peaceful and sustainable manner. And till this day, today, discovering places is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, North America, and beyond, including many Afro-Indigenous, urban Indigenous, Two-Spirit, queer, and trans-Indigenous people. So I would like to recognize the history of cultural genocide against Aboriginal peoples and Canada's colonial legacy, as well as the ongoing need to change the colonial and racist mindset of our society. Who we are at Pride at Work Canada and what do we do? So through dialogue, education, and thought leadership, we empower employers to build workplaces that celebrate all employees regardless of their gender expression, their gender identity, and sexual orientation. So we help create safer and more inclusive workspaces that realize the full potential of all employees and bring down all those barriers to employment. So as you can see, we have over 250 proud partners and over 75 community partners. You can see some of the folks we work with. We organize a lot of events and activities across Canada, just like this one that is online. But as you can see on the picture, this is a networking event that we put on every year in Montreal called Montreal ProPride. This one was hosted at the Steedley offices in downtown Montreal last year in August. We also do research and benchmarking and publication. I really invite you to take a look at the latest report we published last year around Pride Month. It's called Lead with Pride, Best Practices for Advancing 2SLGBTQIA+ Leadership, where we have worked with about 23 queer and trans seniors and executive leaders about queer stuff and career advancement for 2SLGBTQIA+ folks. And we continuously engage our community, HR and diversity professionals as well, as you're going to see in today's panel. What are we covering today for this panel? So I'm going to obviously do some introductions and welcome our panelists. I think it's very important, since it's Pride Month, to kind of think back of the history behind Pride and the meaning it has for the community. And then we're going to dig deep and see how we can authentically engage 2SLGBTQIA+ influencers for better impact. And we're going to share some resources with you folks. But just before that, I just want to share some guidelines, because we might be talking about topics that are triggering for folks, for some of us. I'm going to ask to respect the privacy and confidentiality of the things that is being shared here. Foster maybe some inclusivity to contribute to a more inclusive and accountable space by asking questions that are respectful and have care, the big values of our community. We're also going to be ending our session with a Q&A, but only questions related to the subject or the panel's professional experiences will be answered. I'm going to quickly go through the history of Pride in the city where I find myself in Toronto. Pride started with gay day picnics on the Toronto Islands, which was organized by the Toronto Gay Action, which is like an offshoot of the Community Homophile Association of Toronto. This picnic lasted through the 70s until 1981, which aligned with the bathhouse raids. Later, to honor the historical connection with New York's gay community, the date was aligned with the June Stonewall riots. Just last month, actually, Toronto has broken the record of longest Rainbow Cross Road. It is on the island. That's something that you can now see in person. So I really invite you, if you are in Toronto, to check it out. It's really wholesome. I'm also going to move to another city, Montreal. In Montreal, Pride began with a march in 79 to mark the 10th anniversary of Stonewall. So celebrations were sporadic until 1993 in honor of the 1990 Sex Garage raid, which united the Anglophone and Francophone communities. When the original organizing group dissolved, Montreal Pride was established in 2007, moving the event to August to accommodate the city's festival schedule. And that's something that I'm actually really passionate about. I think it is really awesome in Canada that we get to celebrate Pride during the best months of the year, from June all the way to the end of September. And in some other places, we still, on the West End, like in Banff, we celebrated in October. So Pride celebrations really continue to go on. Also want to talk about the corporate involvement in our Pride festivities. Initially, Pride, as we have seen, was a grassroots movement responding to police violence and systemic oppression against 2SLGBTQIA+ communities. The first Pride marches were really acts of resilience to reclaim our space and visibility for those who are marginalized. And for nearly 2 decades, Pride events remained largely community-driven, with minimal to no corporate presence. And it wasn't until the late 80s that we began to see the first corporate sponsors, primarily from industries like alcohol and condom companies, which were somewhat related to the nightlife and sexual health aspects of the community. This initial corporate involvement was driven by a recognition of the 2SLGBTQIA+ as a distinct market. In the 1990s, the AIDS crisis prompted further corporate engagement, particularly from pharmaceutical companies that were part of the AIDS activism movement. This period saw a convergence of health advocacy and corporate sponsorship, highlighting the urgent needs of the community and fostering a sense of corporate responsibility. By the late 90s, the financial sector began to recognize the economic potential of the 2SLGBTQIA+ market. Banks and other financial institutions started participating in Pride events, which now reflects, a change, a social shift towards inclusion, towards 2SLGBTQ individuals as customers. With year 2000, this decade maybe has been marked with a significant increase in more corporate participation. So we see more and more companies across various industries start joining Pride celebrations. And they bring DEI as part of the integral components of their corporate social responsibility, which is awesome. And by the end of 2010, corporate involvement in Pride had become a business opportunity. It is now like a business imperative. Companies recognized that supporting Pride was not only about inclusion, diversity, social justice, but also about market opportunities. This period that we saw a transformation in how businesses view their role in supporting 2SLGBTQI+ rights and making, inclusion a core aspect of their identity, sometimes for that month only. But that's what we're going to be talking about. I'm sure that you are probably tired of that history class. I'm gonna go to the more exciting part of today's event, which is our panel. I'm so excited to be presenting this panel because I'm basically working with folks that I see when I open my phone and folks that I'm really passionate and I continuously double tap left and right. Their content has really brought me joy during the pandemic. I'm talking about all three of them. So here it goes. I'm going to introduce our speakers for today. First up, we have Hayley Robinson, they, them. Hayley Robinson is a Cree Filipinx two-spirit actor, model, and advocate residing in Ottawa. Growing up in Alberta and adopted into a white family, Hayley yearned for community. After getting sober from years of struggling with addiction, they took to social media to share their journey of reconnecting back to their cultures and their bio family, and creating representation for folks like them in the media. Hayley is also an ambassador for MAID, celebrating Canadian media, Sex Fluent, an online non-for-profit of CanFAR, which is the Canadian Foundation of AIDS Research. Hayley was recently featured as Rezo in Bar Grease and voice acted in Kimotowin, The Act of Stealing on Crave, and HBO's Max Only You, an animated shorts collection. Hello, Hayley.
Dansekia. Hello, everyone. It's so great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Sorry, my camera is not working for some reason, but hopefully you can see everything I'm trying to take out of my voice.
We can feel you. We can hear you loud and clear. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, next up we have Jamie Pandit. Jamie Pandit. Oh.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi,
Thank you so much for joining us. Let me introduce you correctly. Whoa. Wow, Zoom is not cooperating with this queer person today. Jamie is a transgender content creator, fashion icon for City Line, and one of Canada's most recognized voices in the digital beauty space. She speaks to her experience of transitioning and shares how fashion and beauty play important roles in her self-expression. Her audience love her have positive and uplifting content and can always rely on her to be 100% authentic. Jamie uses her voice to share her story, give back to the 2SLGBTQIA+ community, raise awareness for causes dear to her heart, and the struggle she faces as daily as a transgender woman of color. Thank you, Jamie, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And last but not least, I have the honor of introducing you Kissy Duerre, who is a who is a multi-platform digital creator. She creates self-love, motivational, and lifestyle content through fashion, beauty, humor, and advocating for trans and queer youth. Kissy sprinkles a little bit of love, kindness, and hope in almost every content she shares with the world, hoping that one less person might feel not so alone. Hi, Kissy.
Hi everyone. I'm so glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
If the panelists feel comfortable to open their camera, please feel free to do so. It would be awesome to see you all and to give you a little hi.
I think you might have
exactly what James about to say.
Let me change that right now by making all of you co-hosts. I apologize for this. Zoom is not my ally right now, but we will gonna make them.
Yes.
Hi, yes, I see you. Hey, Kissy. Hi, Jamie. Oh, sweet. Thank you. I feel less alone. I'm so excited to have you all. I've been a big fan of your content for a long time, and I'm really excited for my workplace to get to know you better. I propose that we dive in the subject which we are here for, which is engaging 2SLGBTQIA+ influencers for impact. I have prepared some questions for you, and we are also going to allow the audience to ask questions at the end, but we're only going to be taking questions that are related to the topic, of course. Yes, engaging 2SLGBTQIA+ influencers for impact. Well, the first question I have for all of you is would you mind sharing a little more about yourself? Let's start by getting to know you a little better. Each of you has a unique and inspiring journey, and honestly, we'd love to hear more about your background and what brought you to become advocates and influencers within the 2SLGBTQIA+ community. Can each of you maybe share your personal journey and what had led you to become an advocate and influencer for our community? Maybe starting with you, Jamie. I see that you have the mic already open, ready to go.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm sorry if my internet connection is the internet's a little bit iffy. So if I'm not making sense, just like let me know to repeat anything. But a little bit about me, I guess. So I was actually born in Bangladesh. I moved to Canada, Toronto, when I was 11. I knew I was different always. Since I was a kid, I just didn't have a word to describe my experience or what to make of it. I came out to my parents at 15 after, I guess, finding out what the word transgender meant, even though I didn't love it or want to accept it. I just knew I was different, and I, started wearing a little bit of mascara to school, and my friends would be like, why does your lashes look long? And I'm like, girl, they're just growing. Or a little bit of Vaseline on my lips. just to make them look shiny. Just it was like my way of like starting to feel like myself. So beauty and fashion was like a huge part of my identity and helped me find that confidence within myself. So after I came out to my parents at 15, things didn't really go well. And I knew that I had to find that confidence within myself to take care of me, start the transitioning process, which meant, finding a job. And since we're, with product, we're talking about work here, my first job at 16, I was let go because the company found out I was trans, which was obviously very disheartening. But it just all kind of made me realize that I really had to be strong for myself. I ended up being homeless at 16 because home wasn't a safe place, and it in a way made me grow up really fast. It made me again realize that in order for me to really be myself, I had to find my own path, and eventually it made me move different cities at 17. It also made me hide my identity, unfortunately. So from 17 till just 4 years ago, which feels like a long time, but also not a long time at all. Just 4 years ago, I was hiding my identity. So I had friends, I have had different jobs, I went to university. People didn't know I was trans. So when I came out in 2020, I lost my job because of COVID, and there was a lot going on. I'm about to get married, which is a whole other thing. It was also like, I think the biggest year at the time when trans women of color were being murdered. I was just hearing a lot of news, and something in me just felt like, I'm about to get married. I want people to get to know who I am. I really wanted to feel free finally, instead of hiding my identity for so long, over half my life. So 2020 was the year I publicly came out through a YouTube video. And yeah, that's kind of like my journey. And I just started creating content full time. And, I found myself through creating content. I started loving myself, loving my identity, finding a community, and working with so many different brands, working and doing things that I didn't think were possible. A little bit about me.
Thank you so much for this, Jamie. Yes, now I see that you're also part of Pride Toronto's campaign, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but you were in New York to do something for Pride as well. So a very busy month for you, I assume.
It's a New York trip, but it's a brand trip. But honestly, like being part of the Pride Toronto campaign is such a dream come true, because I was not proud of my identity for so long, and I felt like I did everything to like run away from anything Pride related, anything rainbow related, because I wanted to keep myself a secret. So to be, a face within for Pride, and to be able to like see myself like out there in such a big way feels really healing. And it just, it creates that representation I needed as a Bangladeshi trans woman of color.
Totally, and I'm sure that is inspiring for a lot of Bangladeshi trans person in Canada, seeing themselves being represented.
Yeah, it's honestly, every time I think about these things that I'm doing, it's really emotional, because I feel like I'm living my wildest dreams, which is just something I feel like very privileged to have. And this is part of the reason why I am so loud, and I talk about my mental health, talk about my experiences, talk about my marriage. Like I've never seen someone, even somebody who's trans, find love, and let alone not just love, but get married. So these kind of different representations are so important, to see somebody that they cannot just exist, but they can also thrive and be successful and find happiness. It's just so important for us to see.
And also we are very lucky to have you with us today. Thank you. We're gonna move on to Haley. Haley, I got to meet you at Chez dans la Capitale, Pride Ottawa last year, which was so awesome. Also, as a queer of color, to see you on stage was incredible. To see you in the streets. Yeah, can you share your personal journey with us, and how you got to become the icon that you are today?
Hi again. I'm Haley, and so I was adopted right from birth into a white Christian household. But my bio mom immigrated from the Philippines when she was 17, and then my bio dad is Cree from Muskeg Cree Nation in Saskatchewan. And yeah, growing up in a white Christian household in Calgary as a BIPOC person was a lot. I was very confused a lot of my life, and I think I also held a lot of internal hate for myself growing up. You know, I wanted to be able to experience my my full identity and who I was, but growing up and being told that you have to be a certain way, you know, follow the westernized ideals of society and what colonization has put on us, I felt very limited into who I was allowed to be and what I was allowed to do. And it wasn't until I think I hit grade 10, I went to a performing arts school in Calgary and I started meeting a lot of more queer people. But it was still like around in 2012 when, you know, people would be queer, but they would never talk about it. Like it was still something that was very like hush hush, keep a secret. And like if you knew, you knew. Um, and so I remember coming out as bi back then. And there's this huge stereotype of bisexual people of them being promiscuous or being unfaithful, couldn't be in a monogamous situation, or were just not like set in who they were yet. They were just, you know, it was just going to be a phase. And so I dealt with that a lot. And it made me kind of want to stay back in my little bubble of just what I knew was safe. And that quickly led down a path of many addictions. And I was kicked out at the age of 17 because I kept bringing my addictions back to the house. And so, yeah, I was jumping from couch to couch, sleeping in fields and stuff for about a year before I found a group of other what I call Nasians, because Native and Asian people, and we just kind of like really clicked. We were all queer BIPOC people just trying to like figure our lives out as well as like partying together and trauma bonding in that sense, which was not the best. um but they helped me open up myself more to understanding my identity as a indigenous, as a Cree person. And unfortunately, one of my friends who really helped me through that, she went missing and was later found a month later in Calgary. And so that was my first experience with MMIW. For those of you who are unfamiliar, MMIW stands for Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women. It has been a huge problem here in Canada, in the States, and yeah, I dealt with that, and it really just like changed the gears in my head, and I became sober. I started researching more about my bio family and just wanting to get more connected into the Indigenous communities and to the Filipino communities and just explore who I really was. And then COVID hit during that time, and I just had even more um, of nothing to do than to just research. And I found so many amazing queer people in the community. My family, randomly, I found them on like Instagram. It would be off an off chance. We just would love each other. We'd support each other. And then later on would be like, oh my God, wait, who's your family? In the Native community, that's always who you got to ask first is who's your family? Who's your dad? And then you instantly know, you make a connection. But yeah, they helped me also find the word two spirit, which is an umbrella term in the Indigenous community, which identifies people who have a masculine and feminine spirit and who can embody both and walk in the journey as two. And before colonization, Two-Spirit people have always been around. They didn't have a name for them, and they were very respected people in their communities. You know, they were healers, they were medicine people, they were educators. And in some tribes, you know, ceremonies would never start unless a Two-Spirit person was present. And so I was able to find these really amazing people through TikTok and Instagram who were educating me and just helping me realize who I truly was. And then I started stepping out of that box more. You know, I cut my hair the way I wanted to. I started making more queer friends because in the relationship I was in back then, my partner was not supportive of that at all. He wanted me to stay in that box. He wanted me to continue being feminine and being just bi for him. And it was very unhealthy. So after getting out of that, I was finally able to just like fully express myself. I found someone who really loves me for me and doesn't care if I'm dressing masculine or feminine or I'm dressing like a they them. Like it doesn't matter to them. And I'm able to now express my art and my creativity with other people. And so yeah, I've been able to get back into acting and being in musical theater, which is something I've always loved growing up. And I find it so important to be able to bring that representation in the media because, you know, there was such a lack of that representation growing up. And it's crazy to say there was a lack of when I was only like a couple of years ago. Like, I feel like we're just on the cusp of being able to integrate it and have it be normalized, what people would say. Like, being able to just see queer people everywhere because we are everywhere. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Well, thank you for this. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your lived experience. As a mixed queer Asian myself, your content really speaks to me. And hearing you talk about reclaiming your space, reclaiming your identity is something very, very touching. And someone else who is no stranger to reclaiming their identity unapologetically and in the most fierce way I know is Kissy Duerre. I've also been such a big fan of you, and I mean your ability to just create videos that just question the binary of how things work is just really inspiring and just really gets you thinking that maybe sometimes our society is a little stupid when especially men do not want to hold purses in public, for example. Kissy, would you mind sharing your personal journey with you and how you got to become an advocate for our community?
Oh, okay, thank you, Matthew. Hi, everyone. I'm Kissy Duerre. So I guess my journey. So basically, my journey started like, okay, so finding myself basically started when I was about 5 years old. I always knew I was like different, but I did not really know how to describe it. I did not have the words for it. But yeah, I just tried to, just trying to just kind of live and, finding myself in a way. And then when I was about 13 years old, it was the first time that I met my adopted dad. So I was born in Tanzania, and my dad was doing some volunteering work, some charity work. He was helping to build a school at a community that I used to go to, at a school that I used to go to. And so that's how it went. And then I met him. And so at the time, and then a couple years later, I lost my biological father. He died of a heart attack. And then, so my dad then, his name is Norman, my adopted dad. So when I met him, like, he was not really my dad yet. And so after he heard about my biological father passing away, then he kind of like, took me in, like, kind of like he became like a father figure to me and my younger brother. And then a couple of years later, he brought me and my brother here to Canada. And so ever since, like, we've been very like very close, and I really love him. I love him so much. And I always share like videos about him and his love and acceptance for me and my gender identity, my journey. And so like the most important thing for me was like about 7 years ago, I lost my mother. She had colon cancer. So it got into stage 4, and basically, well, it was like death was the only way out. And so like when she passed away, I could not go back to the funeral because I was here in Canada. My mother was back in Tanzania. And that was a very hard time for me because I felt like, part of me at the time, and even now, still feels that, would have made me feel better if I was there to say my final goodbyes to my mother, but I couldn't because of like my gender identity. There was so much turmoil and fight, like from my cousins and my mother's side of the family that, I couldn't go back. And there was even a point that, and actually like, going back before even my mother died, when they found out that I had transitioned through social media, then this was like when I was in high school, it was very bad because I even like, faced like, death threats from like the people like back in Tanzania. They would say like, very nasty, mean things that really hurt me. And it was a really dark time, but despite it, I did rise, and I think I still do, and I continue to rise. Anyway, so yeah, and yeah, I don't, where was I? Oh yeah, so yeah, and so with like the passing of my mother, it's been a very difficult time for me. To this day, I'm still struggling with grief because I don't feel like, I had the closure, but I also don't know what the meaning of closure is. But moving forward, I've always chose to go where I'm celebrated and not tolerated. And I think that's what my dad has given me, his love and acceptance for me. It's, I feel that, I'm being celebrated. He loves me unconditionally. And I think it's very interesting, given the fact that he's not even my biological father, but he's just a very kind person. And I really think like, the world definitely needs more of that to make this place, like to make this world a better place in general. And so yeah, and how did I get into like the advocacy through social media? It started in 2020 during the pandemic, and I also love to do art, like I paint and draw, and it was a very hard time for everybody, and especially for me too. And I just wanted like, a creative outlet just to keep me sane and keep me on track. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to start posting videos on TikTok. And that's what I did. And they just like, took off. And then I remember this was also the time when Black Lives Matter went global. And I really was interested in like the intersectionality of advocating for the BIPOC community. And in a way that, at the beginning, it felt that, the Black Lives Matter movement was centered towards like, cis het men. And I felt that like stories of like Black women, queer folks, who are Black, people of color, they were not really being told. And there was still that, like the representation was not really there. And I was very much interested in that. And I started to share videos on TikTok about like the murdered Black trans women. And those were like those videos at first, like, they were very hard to do. And that's what actually it kind of changed. Like I changed my content into like, creating more fashion and lifestyle content, but still I remained to be active for advocating for the trans community, especially trans youth, which is something that I still continue to do to this day. But, yeah. And that's it.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you so much for this quiz, Kissy. Every time I during the pandemic when I've been opening TikTok and I see that rainbow umbrella, I know I'm in for like a good time. And you know, being from a place where you're not fully able to embrace your identity and your other intersectional identities is and to be able to do it in such an easy ways and is really inspiring. Thank you so much for joining us and being here. Thank you all for this, for sharing your stories with us. I propose we dive in and talking about engagement. We know that authentic engagement with the 2SLGBTQ+ community is essential for meaningful advocacy. If you're not authentic, we know that it's not going to work. And as we've heard, representation plays a big role in this. Will the panelists share their insight on what maybe authenticity means to them and how organizations can ensure that these efforts are genuine but also impactful? In your experience, what are some key strategies for building successful and mutually beneficial partnerships with 2SLGBTQIA+ influencers? Jamie, would you like to go first?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like the word authentic and authenticity, we hear it so much. And then sometimes I feel like we kind of throw it around loosely. Like, what does that really mean? I think we have to really understand what that means to us specifically. But I also think brands need to really understand what that means for them and how they're going to support the people that are authentic. Because not everybody starts off from the same starting point. That's just the reality of being or having a marginalized, oppressed identity. And I think brands, organizations, employers just need to be mindful that a lot of queer people often have a lot of trauma, a lot of history, a lot of experiences that first of all, they might not even be able to share with anybody else openly, or they might not have friends or family to share it with. They might not have that support. So you want to feel safe and heard and seen, especially at work. So I think for me personally, I know for me, I kept my identity a secret from 16 till I was 32 because if I'm being honest, like I don't think I would have had the opportunities in life that I have now if I didn't keep myself a secret. The fact of the matter is many trans women, and especially trans women of color, don't have like quote unquote normal lives. You know, we don't get the normal full-time management positions. We're not in leadership roles. We don't get to exist in most spaces. So I think when I first started creating content, I felt very lucky and very privileged, like, oh my God, a brand wants to work with me. And I literally did the most and did anything and also so much for free, like creating that free content, you know, being that tokenized trans person for Pride, you know, unboxing every rainbow washed PR box, showing the products, the brands for, you know, for free. I think it's the last year, and I'll get into a little bit later, and this year, sure, I'll get into a little bit more, but I think when I really realized that it's so important to say no. Like there's power in saying no. And there's power in speaking up. And it is hard sometimes because, you know, you want to survive, you need to make money, but then also it's important, like, you know, if you have a voice, it's important to speak up because for me personally now, like in the beginning of my content creation journey, it was about making money. Of course, I wanted to be successful. Of course, I wanted to be out there. Yes, like I want to build a community, but also content creation is my full-time job. Like I wanted to be a successful content creator, but now it's all about, I think for me, working with brands that actually care about LGBTQIA 2S+ creators and people. and empower our voice, share our stories. So I think one of the main things that brands and organizations, as you asked, could really benefit from is hearing our stories and what we need from us instead of assuming what we need. Because the truth of the matter is there still aren't a lot of queer people in, again, leadership roles, working in agencies, working under brands. So it's really important to talk to us in a way where we want to open up and not just see it as a transactional relationship. I think it's also important for queer folks, and I know it's so hard because we often just want to keep it to ourselves. We don't want to be that crazy trans person. We don't want to seem like we're being difficult. We don't want to seem like, you know, we have all these problems, but again, like, we do face a different kind of challenges than our cisgender, non-queer counterparts. So we have to be honest, and brands really have to work with us with compassion, understanding, and care. I think that's all I wanted to say. If there's more, I might add in later.
No, thank you for this. What I'm hearing from this is for companies to have, well, for queer professionals and queer folks to have the ability, the will to say no when needed, to put down boundaries, but also to have more thought into potentially working with brands and do more research and not being tokenized.
And I think for brands, this is what I wanted to say. It's not just about, I mean, I think we talk about this a lot, but it's not just about working with queer folks during Pride, but, you know, we're queer 365 days a year. Like, I'm trans all the time. It's working with us all throughout the year and Pride, because, you know, I think Pride is a time for a lot of us, we didn't celebrate our identities, and I feel like I celebrate all the time now because it's so important to me. But during Pride, I really do want to connect even deeper. I really want to celebrate. I want to be loud and bold and proud. And brands need to really work with us all the time. And I think this year, I've noticed Pride just feels very different. It's quieter than it has ever been. I am not working with a lot of brands, if I'm being honest. And it's not because I don't want to, it's because the opportunities are just not there. And it is sad because, you know, for many brands that have tokenized queer people for years and years and years, and rainbow wash and profited from Pride, this year, because the hate towards queer people and specifically trans people has been so bad, on media, on TV, you know, with all these different policies and laws and legislation, a lot of brands are scared to work and understand where they're coming from. But unfortunately, because they're scared, they're letting the hate win. They're showing that if the hate gets louder, that they're going to win. And this is a time when, you know, we really need brands to show up during Pride and all the time.
Yeah, I definitely hear that that the community exists beyond this month of Pride. Thank you so much for this, Jamie. Does Haley or Kissy want to add anything to this question? In your expertise, yeah, what are some key strategies for building successful and mutually beneficial partnership with queer and trans influencers? Feel free to unmute yourself. Thank you.
100%. I always want to be working with brands who are educated. And like Jamie said, like, I'm going to be queer all the time, like every day of the year. And so what are you going to do for every day of the year instead of just for 1 month? Are you going to continue doing the work? Are you also going to continue speaking up for gender diversity, for sexual health, for mental health, for harm reduction? Like, that is all in tune to everything. And it's like, I don't want to be a part of anything you're going to be a part of if you're just going to like use me as a token because I was the first person that popped up when you typed in Two Spirit. Like, I want to know that you're actually out there doing the work and educating yourself, and not only educating yourself, but educating others, because it doesn't stop from just educating yourself. It continues with you talking about it to other people, even if it's just with your family or just with your friends. Like, maybe someone is going to hear that and they're going to get inspired and to continue talking about it, and so on and so forth. And so just being on this whole train of just educating people, that's, I think, is like the most important. Like, just, keep informed. And yeah, that's what I have to add.
Thank you. I do think that most of the time when queer and trans folks are being hired by organizations, they kind of take that role of educator. And that's, I think, the point that you're sharing, that if you're an organization, it's also your duty to kind of do the homework and not being expected to give you answers to everything. Thank you so much, Haley. I'd like to also give some time to Kissy to share some insights.
You know what, like, what the two panelists said, like, they made very good points, especially the fact that, I think it's very important for brands to show up all year round, and also, like, their work, like showing that, they work with, like, people who belong to the queer community, not just like, because, like, they want that specific product to be promoted, but actually, like, doing other initiatives, like, what do you do in terms of like closing the gap for the homelessness that, affecting the queer queer community? What do you do to, like, to help combat, like, suicide rates, among trans and queer youth? Like, what do you do? Like, things like that. I think that's very important for brands. And even for myself, whenever I have like a brand that wants to work with me, especially during Pride Month, I always try to kind of ask, like, what do you, like, what are some of the things that, you have done in the past to support like the queer community? Just kind of like, just wanting to know. And sometimes I can just, like, I don't have to necessarily ask the brand that. I can just try to like Google it, or I can just go through their page and see what do they do. Maybe even like click on their links on their bios to see, like, are there like any fundraisers that they do, charity work and stuff like that, that is queer specific. It just shows that there is inclusion, and I think that is very important. Yeah.
Thank you.
One thing as well with Haley and Kissy is that I find sometimes that brands will work with a queer person, and they'll post about their products or whatever on their page, but they won't post the queer person on their page because they're so afraid what their community will say. And this is where, Haley, when you're talking about the education part, I feel like that's what's missing, because they're not educating their community on that representation on their page. It's like it didn't really help make the message louder or bigger, because only my community saw the brand's messaging, like, oh, hey, this is the inclusive brand now because Jamie worked with them. But then on their page, they didn't say anything about anything trans related. So like, what was the point of the campaign? It didn't really do anything besides sell the product on my page.
That is such a good point. Thank you.
I hope unfortunately.
I hope you are all taking notes, because that is also a really good point. Well, you don't have to take notes, because I'm just going to remind you that this webinar will be shared with you as well as the presentation. So actually, you don't have to take notes, but yes, please do listen carefully. I hear from that organizations, when they're saying that they're ready to support the community, they should be doing it fully. They should also be prepared to face the backlash that it represents to be working with the community. And what I hear from Kissy is that also, yes, do more your homework, but also think about the intersectional challenges that are being faced by not only 2SLGBTQIA+ folks, but 2SLGBTQIA+ folks of color, who are also not necessarily being represented all the time. We see a lot of cis gay white men, but think of all the other challenges that the other parts of the community do face. Thank you so much, folks. I also want to be mindful of the time, so I'm gonna move on to the next question, but we also have time in, later on if we want to add some last minute things. I'm going to start with you, Kissy, for this question to shuffle a bit the deck. How can organization collect and utilize feedback from the community to improve their initiatives and partnerships, in your opinion?
Ooh, that's a tough one. We're getting into data and analytics. Okay. So I think, how can organizations collect and utilize feedback? Well, I really do believe like the best way to collect any sort of feedback is like directly from the community that you're actually working with, like the community that you want to be represented. That is exactly where you're supposed to go, and not like, other secondary sources. And so I think, like, there are different ways, perhaps like, through asking, you can, asking like the people that your actual brands, like, asking the people that they're working with, how can they improve, I think, something like this, like, this is exactly how it's supposed, this is what we're doing right now, having like, panelists, like, who actually are the living experience of, yes, and I think that is very important. And I believe that's like one way to approach it. And then also, I also want to say that, I think it's very important to always maintain an open mind. I think sometimes certain, like, brands, when they approach, like, certain creators, they would have like this kind of like this idea of what they want, or what they expect to come from that creator, or what stories they want the creator to share. But I think there's always, it's vital for brands to have that, to give, to allow that creative liberty to the creator, because certain stories, like, I may share my personal story here because I feel comfortable sharing it, then it does not necessarily mean certain aspect of that story I would be open to having it shared with the rest of the world. Does that make sense? Capitalizing on maybe on my experience. It depends on the experience, because some of it can be very, it's painful, maybe something it's hard to look at, and a person is perhaps not ready to do it, to share about it. And yeah, I think authenticity, yeah.
Thank you so much. I think that really is it. You're hitting it on, you're 100%. What I'm hearing from you is that in order to gather and collect feedback in the most appropriate way from the community, is to conduct research and ask community members directly, to not, assume anything from the community, to not have a preconceived vision of how you want your campaign to be. I think it should be consulted through queer folks before being released. I think these are extremely useful tips. Haley, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I actually wanted to mention the CRBC. I see them all the time everywhere. I saw them at the Two-Spirit Powwow, I saw them at the Ottawa Pride, I saw them at Toronto Pride, and they always have that survey ready. And you get $5 if you do this survey that takes like 10 minutes to do. But I'm gonna still do it for that $5. But also just being able to be like, just to be there and to have it ready for people to answer, I think is so great. So I think just them being able to assert themselves in these spaces with questions, with surveys. What's another thing too? Like I set up a booth for Sex Fluent at a queer prom, and we had like little surveys available, but we also were like educating the youth there about like safe sex or like resources for mental health and stuff. So I think just like putting yourself in these environments, in these spaces, and like asking the questions that you're trying to get the answers from the people. Yeah, that's what I have to add on.
Thank you. Yeah, the CBRC is actually a partner of ours, so I'm really glad that you mentioned that. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that folks should have the comfort to assert yourself in places with questions and survey as well, but also questions and surveys that are approved by queer and trans folks, not questions that seem invasive or inappropriate, because many times we're seeing more and more of this. We're seeing a lot of, not a lot, obviously not a lot, but we're seeing queer groups that are exclusionary of some folks within the community. So it's really important to really do an in-depth research, even with the question that you're going to be bringing forward. Thank you so much, Haley. I'm gonna pass it on to Jamie. Jamie, would you like to add anything to what the two previous panelists said?
I think they've done such a good job kind of answering the question. I would just say, yeah, like education is so important from queer folks, from them doing their research, and really, again, like if you're supporting Pride, if you're supporting us, it's doing it all the time and really the full scope again, right? So if we are talking about their products, we're influencing their brand, they need to be able to do that for us as well. It has to be mutually beneficial, because if I'm saying things like, I love this brand and you should love it too, for whatever reason, they need to be able to also do that as well on their end, no matter the backlash. And I think also understanding again intersectionality, which is so important, because the experience of a cisgender white gay man is very different than somebody who is non-binary, person of color, and whatever their ethnicity is, right? It's just all very different. And for Pride, for example, I feel like this year, a lot of brands have worked with the drag queens and like the cis gay white men, because it's easier than working with like a trans person or a non-binary person, because that would mean they are breaking that gender binary. And it's scary for a lot of people. Like for me personally, because I'm invading women's spaces, it creates a lot of issues in that way. And brands need to really understand the full scope of what it's like to work with that person they're working with.
Thank you so much for this. I hear understanding unique intersectional challenges, and I think that is a very valuable lesson, because we all have our own bias and prejudice wherever we come from, right? So it really is important to educate ourselves on other parts of a community we might not be exposed to, especially if we're working with them. So thank you so much for all of that. It is 1:10. We have 20 minutes left. I have one last question before pivoting to the audience question, if you're all okay with it. Yeah, as we are wrapping up this discussion between us panelists and moderator, I'd like to ask each of you to share one final piece of advice. What advice would you give to organizations that are just starting their journey in 2SLGBTQIA+ advocacy? I feel like we might be repeating ourselves, but it doesn't hurt to repeat, because it's gonna hopefully stay there. Do you want to start first this time, Haley?
I'd say to those brands that are just starting on in this journey, like I always say, educate yourself, learn the history, continue to educate yourself, because it is never going to stop. And don't be afraid to ruffle some feathers, because it's going to be different. It's going to be a lot. And, you know, you got to just continue to push forward instead of push back. And so, yeah, that's my advice.
Thank you. The value in education. Jamie, I see that your mic is on and you stay ready. Do you want to go next?
I was going to say education, obviously, as well, but I think saying something is better than nothing. That's something I think about a lot. So if you're going to start being an ally or advocate for us, I think standing up for us is very important and being loud and proud about it. You know, if you're supporting queer people without really ruffling those feathers or saying nothing, then like, what's the point of the advocacy at all? Like, you need to be talking about it, showing it, normalizing it, because the more you talk about it, the more awareness it builds, and it makes it a normalized conversation amongst the people around you. Kind of like what Haley was saying earlier, like, you know, you could talking about it at work, talking about it at home, talking about it with your friends. It starts to make these conversations normal, because saying certain like derogatory words, like if you, for example, say it out loud, then the people around you think that, oh, okay, this is fine to say it. But then if you actually stand up and correct people that are being bigots, right? Or being transphobic, being homophobic or whatever, then you are taking a stance, and then you're also showing that this is not cool, so don't do it. So for me, definitely, I think we have been educating. I think now's the time to like actually put that education in action.
Thank you. I think normalizing these conversations is a great way to raise awareness and bring down those barriers. Kissy, would you like to add a last advice for organizations that are just starting their journey in advocating for queer and trans folks?
Yeah, so education for sure. And I'd also add, like, you know, I think it's very important to have an open mind and have like, you know, and be open to learning. And also, I think sometimes, like, you know, people feel very scared to like make mistakes, like, you know, maybe like, you know, not using the right pronouns, or like, you know, referring the person the right way. I think, you know, it's okay. Just like, you know, educate yourself, learn about those things, and be open to learning new things. And I think, like, you know, and sometimes it's okay to make mistakes if mistakes are genuine, as long as you don't repeat them. And I can speak that from experience. Sometimes a person may perhaps maybe misgender another person for no reason. And I think as long as like if that person corrects you and you're like, you know what, noted, I'll do better next time. I think that's very important. Yeah.
Thank you. I think you're touching a very essential lesson here. I think that most of the time, even within the queer community, I do it too. I unpurposely misgender folks. I think that when making a mistake, it's so important to catch yourself making that mistake and learn from it. Like, there's no shame in making mistake and trying to be better. So that's such a good advice. Thank you. Well, thank you for bearing with my questions that I had about engaging queer and trans influencers. Hopefully it was not painful and it was a good time for y'all. We're going to pivot to our audience question for the last part of our panel. We'll only be answering questions, so please feel free to write your question that you deem are appropriate. This time I'm gonna do it popcorn style, because we have about like 10 minutes to close the questions. Whoever wants to answer, please feel free to just unmute yourself. The first question we get is from Nadia. Nadia, thank you so much for your question. I'm working on my company's Pride strategy as a queer person, and we are hosting a learning journey series to educate staff internally. Is it appropriate to include folks who are not a part of the community in assisting me in presenting? Does this achieve showing unity, or does it override the voice of those who are queer?
Okay, I'll answer it. Okay. I think there's nothing wrong with like having people who are not part of the community to help you run the event. I think the most important thing is like the ratio. You wouldn't necessarily just want to have like all these people who are not part of the community and then only have 1 or 2 people who are part of the queer community. That's basically tokenization. I think, you know what I'm trying to say. So I think I think it's very important to have like diverse number of people to be part of this creative group. And when I say like about queer people, like I don't necessarily just like mean maybe like just like, they maybe just like, gay men or like lesbians or white and all that. I think just kind of like, taking into consideration about like, different lived experiences, like somebody who is maybe non-binary and maybe different ethnicity at the same time. And of course, you know what I'm trying to say? Yeah. Okay. I would want to save time.
No, thank you. I think it is very important to think about the composition of that group and not only just represent, folks that are too overly represented already in the media within the community, because we exist in different forms, in different ethnicities, age, and various abilities as well. Thank you. I'm going to move on to another question. The panelists are also free to activate the mic if they want to jump in. Discussions on this topic seem to have underlying presumption of business owners and decision makers being predominantly cis hetero. What can we do to elevate and empower and engage more 2SLGBTQIA+ small and medium-sized businesses who don't have the same resources? Even organizations like Pride at Work Canada and the Canadian Queer Chamber of Commerce often aren't within reach of small queer-owned operated businesses. It's a really good question. Now we're talking about business owners, decision makers that are being predominantly cishet and I assume white as well. What can we do to elevate, empower queer businesses that are small to medium sized, who don't have the same resources?
I think the first step of being able to elevate those queer BIPOC small businesses is to support them, like to support them any way you can. It can be by donating to them, by buying some of their art, by reposting their page on your socials, talking about it with friends too, letting them know that this is a business that you're really interested in, you would really love to amplify, just amplifying it. Yeah, that's what I have to say on that.
Yeah, do you research about these queer organization and this YouTube to also do the work to find it and also bring some more visibility to it? It's really, really important. And we also know that in terms of even exposure or lobbying, even like these small queer businesses do not get the same attention. Thank you, Haley. I would like to tackle the last question if no one else wants to add anything. We have an anonymous attendee asking us, I am a white passing queer person, but it seems I am doing a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of content creation at my organization. I do not know everything though, and I want to ensure I am creating content that resonates for more of the community than just myself. Any resources to suggest? And I'm turning towards you three to help me find an answer for this question. Can obviously think about it for a couple seconds. We don't have to have the answer right away.
I'd say I would address this concern. Just be like, hey, I'm having troubles feeling like I'm connecting to a lot of more people than just like me as a white queer person. I would love to start collaborating with people. I think that's the best way to help educate other people is through collaboration. And so maybe they can reach out to BIPOC queer people whom they really look up to, or who are doing some advocacy work, and collaborate with them, learn their story, learn who they are, learn what they do, and make a post with them, or yeah, something like that. But yeah, I think the best teaching is always through collaboration with other people.
Thank you. If there is an issue, what I'm reading from this prompt is that there's a little bit of also tokenization from this. If you're the only queer person, you shouldn't have all the weight of our community on your shoulders. And as Haley said, you should feel comfortable to be able to speak up about that. We will also be including resources in this topic, so fret not. We're going to have resources about it. But thank you so much, Haley. Does Kissy or Jamie want to add anything to this last question?
I've been thinking, I mean, there's a lot of, again, like information on like social media, TikTok, Instagram, and that's how you can find a lot of knowledge on like other people's experiences. But I think if you're like the only person in our organization, I think that's kind of like where that needs to change. I'm like, this is simple.
I agree. Look at the problem where at its roots, if you're the only person, yeah, maybe that's also a red flag. Thank you so much for this. Kissy, any insight?
You know, like nothing much really. I think I liked what hold on for a second. I like what Haley had said, like, you know, you can just like, you know, reach out to your own, because this person is obviously like a content creator as well. That's what I'm getting. You can just like, you know, reach out to the community and just, you know, post it on your social media and just say like, you know, hey, I'm looking to reach out to like, you know, different diversity of like within the queer community. What are the things that I can do? You'd be amazed. People always have amazing tips. Like, I think that's like one of the best ways really to approach this situation, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We have some really valuable insights that are being shared with us, and it's been really wonderful to be able to have such an iconic cast coming and sharing their expertise on how to make this world better for queer and trans people. I think it's wonderful. If you're an organization, please consider working with these three amazing folks. It's been my honor to do so, and it will feel good. Also, thank you so much, Haley, for answering the questions and the Q&A. I've really enjoyed that as well. One person asked us what are the primary root causes of homophobia and transphobia, or homophobic and transphobic beliefs in society. Haley answered right away, colonization, which I think it's the key. Westernized ideals of how society should be, the structure of society, how society was built. Yeah, if you see any other questions that were not answered, feel free to unmute yourself. But yeah, a last thank you and a last hurrah to Kissy Duerre, to Haley Robinson, and to Jamie Pandit. Thank you so much, you legends, for being here with me. It's been incredible. I'm going to close it off because I have 5 minutes left, which is sharing my resources. I know that some of our topics were triggering, so we'd like to also guide you to the appropriate resources if needed. You have some of the resources from us, a list of all the events that we are putting on. The next event is in person in Montreal, the Montreal Pride. We have some resource guides as well as the e-learning programs and the ambassador programs. We also have hyperlinks leading to the social media pages of our panelists today, Haley, Jamie, and Kissy. As per usual, we are leaving a feedback, a survey for your feedback. Please feel free to share the future resources, topics you would like to hear from us. We value your feedback enormously. And yeah, you have my information if you want to reach out to me for any other question. But thank you so much, everyone, for being here and for joining us. I wish you an excellent Pride Month. Hydrate, feed yourself, treat yourself, love yourself. And I shall see you back at our next event. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Great job, Mathieu. What a great panel.